a deal between U.S. and Chinese regulators, but will it bring an end to the ongoing debate over audit access? And will Beijing keep its promises? Washington suspending 26 Chinese airlines in September. The move responds to China's halting of over 24 U.S. flights over COVID-19 policy. Visiting Taiwan, a new trend for lawmakers. More than 10 delegations from North America, Europe, and Asia will visit the island before the new year. And underground churches in China raided by authorities. Beijing is asking state-run churches to toe the Communist Party's line. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Before we dive into today's news, make sure to use the link below to subscribe to our newsletter and an exclusive behind-the-scenes snapshot for our readers. Keep an eye out. The newsletter will land in your inbox Friday morning. U.S. and Chinese regulators are taking a step forward on a long-term debate. They signed an audit agreement this week about Chinese companies listed in the U.S., but some are debating whether China will keep its promises. Here's more.
A new agreement could mean progress on a long-held debate between U.S. and Chinese regulators. But experts say they're not convinced.
In China, they're turning their machinery and their manufacturing to preparation for warfare. So I think this is a delaying tactic. I don't see this as good for American investors.
Officials announced the signing Friday. They say the agreement is a first step. That's for the U.S. to inspect registered accounting firms in China and Hong Kong. U.S. audit overseer, the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or PCAOB, called it the most detailed agreement with China so far. The U.S. has long required that Chinese companies listed in the U.S. open their audit books for American regulators. But Beijing has refused to allow it, citing national security reasons. As of Friday, the U.S. identified over 160 Chinese companies that may face delisting for failure to comply with those audit requirements. The new deal comes as a relief for those companies, since now they still stand a chance at keeping their access to the U.S. market. PCAOB disclosed in a statement that the agreement would allow U.S. regulators sole discretion to inspect firms free from Chinese consultation or input. They will also be able to view all audit work papers and retain information as needed. The statement added that the PCAOB has direct access to interview and take testimony from all personnel associated with the audits. The Chinese side has said it hopes the agreement solves the audit issue and helps avoid passive delisting. But some are expressing doubt on whether Beijing will hold up its end. Chairman of Securities and Exchange Commission, Gary Gensler, commented on the signing. He said the agreement will be meaningful only if the PCAOB actually can inspect and investigate completely audit firms in China.
But there has been fraud. We saw it with Luckin Coffee and other companies. We've seen repeated examples of fraud. Even when there's U.S. court judgments that have come against these fraudulent Chinese companies, there's no way to get the money back.
Kevin Freeman is the host of Economic War Room. He says he doesn't have much faith in the agreement. Freeman suggests that investors should steer clear of Chinese companies, saying that if something were to happen geopolitically with China, all of that investment will become dead money.
Washington will suspend more than 24 flights from China to the U.S. over the next month. Officials made the announcement on Thursday. The suspension takes effect September 5th and runs through the 28th. The decision responds in kind to Beijing's suspension of 26 American flights. The Department of Transportation accused Beijing of violating an air travel agreement and called the move unfair to airlines. China applied a policy this month, saying if 4% of a flight's passengers test positive, the flight will be suspended for a week. If that number rises to 8%, the suspension will extend to 2 weeks. Back to the U.S. suspension. Regulators halted 7 Air China flights from New York City and 19 others from Los Angeles. That's after similar decisions earlier this year. The Transportation Department opted to suspend 44 China-bound flights back in January. China then suspended 44 U.S.-bound flights the same month. A new trend seems to be forming among lawmakers visiting Taiwan. It all started with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's high-profile visit to the island and Beijing's fiery reaction. Let's take a look at what's happening.
Taiwan is becoming a hot destination for U.S. lawmakers. Just this Friday, the island's president Tsai met with Senator MarshaBlackburn in Taipei. There, she spoke about Chinese aggression.
And they were just waiting for an excuse to bully Taiwan. They are clearly testing Taiwan's resolve and the rest of the world's tolerance for even more imperialist violence.
In a statement, Blackburn said she would continue to stand with Taiwan and its right to freedom and democracy. She added that, quote, Xi Jinping doesn't scare me. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen called Blackburn an important and close friend. In response to the trip, the Chinese embassy in Washington said Beijing would take resolute countermeasures. The meeting comes against a backdrop of uncertainties surrounding relations between Beijing, Taiwan, and the U.S. Among the biggest questions, will the Chinese Communist Party try to take Taiwan by force? The U.S. does not have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, but is bound by law to provide the island with the means to defend itself. What's more, Taiwan is critical for America's safety. The island is part of a line of defense stretching from Japan to Malaysia. Known as the First Island Chain, it prevents the Chinese regime from launching submarine-based missile attacks against the U.S. The U.S. also relies on Taiwan for its most advanced semiconductors, or microchips. These tiny devices are the brains of modern electronics, from cars to computers and iPhones to fighter jets and missiles. Tensions reached a new high following House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island early this month. She's now the highest-ranking U.S. politician to visit Taiwan in 25 years. Beijing responded with week-long military drills around the island. But that hasn't stopped other American politicians from going. Last week, Senator Edward Markey and Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb also visited Taiwan. Other countries are also showing support. Officials from at least 6 countries plan to visit Taiwan before the end of 2022. That includes lawmakers from Japan, Canada, Germany, Britain, Denmark, Lithuania, and the European Union. A Canadian lawmaker plans to visit Taiwan in October. China responded that it would take forceful measures. Canada replied that China should not use the planned visit as excuse for military aggression. A Japanese lawmaker already met with Taiwan's president this Tuesday. He plans to visit the island again in October. 8 lawmakers from Germany plan to go to Taiwan in October. The trip was planned in 2020 but got postponed because of the pandemic.
Taiwan's top China policy advisor is heading to the U.S. in September. The purpose of the trip is to rally international support for the island at a time when Taiwan is increasingly under the shadow of Chinese military aggression. The advisor, Chiu Tai-shen, will speak at the Brookings Institution and meet with U.S. officials. Taiwan's foreign minister says the island won't bow to Beijing's pressure.
Even though Chinese trying to coerce us internationally, trying to coerce our friends to stop our friends from coming in, it won't work.
Wu says Beijing has been sending warships and fighter jets across the median line. That's an unofficial divide between mainland China and Taiwan.
Obviously, China's motivation is to destroy the Taiwan Straits status quo. And after this, they want to cut down on Taiwan's defensive space.
He notes Taiwan has been working very closely with the U.S.
We want to procure more defensive weapons from the United States, and we also need to work or discuss with the United States in depth concerning Taiwan's defense, and that has been going on.
Wu points to Beijing's global ambition.
Chinese motivation is not limited to Taiwan. They have ambition over the East China Sea, South China Sea, even beyond the First Island Chain. They also set up strings of pearls in the Indian Ocean.
Wu urges all like-minded countries to work together to prevent Beijing from expanding its authoritarianism. The Chinese Communist Party is tightening its grip on Catholic churches. In August, police raided house churches in several provinces, including Shanxi, Jilin, and Sichuan, plus the city of Beijing. That's according to reports from Bitter Winter magazine. In the northeastern city of Changchun, authorities raided a house church. Agents reportedly beat the believers attending the service. 2 women suffered heart attacks. Authorities took 9 people into custody. In Shanxi, authorities showed up when 70 home church members gathered together. Police arrested the adults, though it's unclear how many of them were detained. China has about 12 million Catholics, and their churches are divided into 2 groups, state-run and underground. The state-run associations reject the Pope's authority, but the underground churches recognize it and often face persecution because of it. In 2018, the Vatican and Beijing signed a historic deal. It allows Beijing and the Pope to appoint bishops in China. Following the deal, the Pope recognized 8 Chinese bishops Beijing previously appointed without his approval. At the same time, Beijing is upping its engagement with its state-run churches. This Tuesday, a top political advisor in the Communist Party met with leadership from 2 state-sanctioned Catholic organizations. The advisor, Wang Yang, urged them to firmly uphold the Communist Party's leadership and push Catholicism to adapt to socialist society. Wang also asked the organization's leaders to resist infiltration by foreign forces and to make Catholicism more Chinese in form. A Hong Kong media tycoon and pro-democracy activist will face trial without jury. The case is renewing criticism that Beijing's national security law imposed on the city is eroding its legal system.
Jimmy Lai, founder of now-defunct media Apple Daily, is facing a trial without jury in Hong Kong. That's after he denied charges based on Beijing's national security law. The trial is set to start in December and will last 30 days. Unlike Jimmy Lai, 6 former management staff intended to plead guilty. That will probably grant them a sentence reduction. And if Jimmy Lai is found guilty of national security charges, he could face life behind bars. 74-year-old Lai is a media tycoon and pro-democracy activist. He was an iconic figure in Hong Kong's 2019 to 2020 pro-democracy protests. Lai was detained after police raided Apple Daily's headquarters offices in 2020 and confiscated large amounts of digital objects. Lai is currently serving 20 years in prison. French agency AFP saw a judge-only trial order for Lai, saying there is a quote, risk of perverting the course of justice if the trial is conducted with a jury. Instead, he will face a 3-judge court panel selected by Hong Kong's government. But international legal observers fear for Hong Kong's legal system and say the judge-only trial is a major concern. The city's national security law, introduced by Beijing, has moved cases away from Hong Kong's jury trial system. Critics call the national security law a useful tool for Beijing to crush dissents.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A soft power contest between China and Hollywood. We sat down with Chris Fenton, author of Feeding the Dragon, as he reflects on his role in opening up the music and movie industry to China.
Well, we were definitely a part of it, and I was a cog in the wheel in the process. I think looking back now, I do feel rather guilty about being part of that process that has gotten here to where we are today.
The full episode is available on our partner platform, Apok TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer, and see you tomorrow.